Hello and welcome to tonight's OddKey Cafe. Tonight we're joined by a very special guest. He's the son of Martin Nodell, who is the creator of the Green Lantern and the Pillsbury Doughboy, and he's come tonight to talk about his father's legacy. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Spencer, and he's joined by his grandson, Quinn.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And remember, audience, tonight is going to be an open community Q&A format. So at any point in time, you can raise your hand and come on up, ask a question yourself, or type it out in chat, and I will ask some questions for you. In the meantime, Spencer, would you maybe like to give an introduction to yourself and to some people who might not be familiar with Martin Nodell?
Well, I was actually born the last year that Martin Nodell did Green Lantern, 1947. And I really didn't know much about him doing the comics until much later, like in the 80s. And then like in the 90s, I spent some time off from work and traveled with them doing comic book shows like San Diego or Chicago Comic-Con, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. Just like they would do like 30 cities a year. So it was like most weekends during the year. And I would get to meet a lot of different Golden Age artists, and then some of the more modern artists, like this fellow named Todd McFarlane. I got to meet him, and then a lot of other really nice people along the way. And that's about it. That's about the history of myself. I'm not an artist or anything.
You were just there. You were part of it, though. That's awesome.
Oh, well, I was, and the year I was born, my dad stopped doing Green Lantern, but then he went on to do work for Stan Lee at Timely, which is now Marvel. And he did that from about 1948, 49 into the end of 1950. So he's Marty passed away in 2006, and there's still a great legacy that he left behind in all his artwork. In fact, we looked at a whole bunch of his sketches and older artwork today. And the Golden Age artists were very prolific. I mean, they drew constantly. Like my dad would draw on napkins. He would draw on just about anything, any piece of paper someone put in front of him. And so there's a lot of Martin Nodell art out there. And I notice there's a lot of it available on like eBay and stuff. But he signed a lot of comic books over like about 25 years of doing shows, doing the Comic-Cons. And that's about the only thing about the history is the part about him going up to All American Comics. It would have been in 1940. He went up to All American, and he presented his art to Max Gaines, who was the publisher of All American, and he wasn't he didn't think he'd get a job out of All American. But they called him back, and Max Gaines called him into the office and said, get to work. And so he brought in his first couple pages of Green Lantern, and they really liked it because they were looking for a third character, and so that's when he, I guess, the first appearance of Green Lantern was in All America 16, with the cover by Sheldon Maldoff, and okay, Quinn. I think Quinn wants to say something. What do you want to say, Quinn? I can't hear you. What do you want to say? Cut it?
No, you're good. Well, introduction. We actually have someone from the audience up on stage here. He might want to ask you a question. And Bull.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
I'm not sure how much you might be able to answer this, but did he ever talk about the inspiration behind the Pillsbury Doughboy or the Green Lantern, or like where the idea kind of came from?
Oh yeah. Well, with Green Lantern, after he had gone up to see Max Gaines, he took the subway back to Brooklyn, and he saw a trainman had a lantern, and it was red for stop for the train and green for go, and then he just thought up the name Green Lantern, and then he also he used some elements from the ring cycle and Greek mythology, and that's how he thought up the Green Lantern. As for the Pillsbury Doughboy, there was the Doughboy was actually thought up and created by Rudy Purz and Milt Schaefer at Leo Burnett Advertising Agency. What they came to my dad and asked him if he could do some drawings of it. So the actual artwork is my dad's, but the idea belonged to those two gentlemen. And I guess they, after he had done some drawings and stuff, they did like a claymation character of the Pillsbury Doughboy. And they never thought it would be, such a big success, or that it would last so long. They thought of it just as a temporary advertising gimmick, and that was it. But it really lasted.
Can I ask another quick question?
Sure.
So were there artists that you met as a child, or like came over to the house?
Yeah, there were a couple people who, like he was friendly with a gentleman named Freddie Yang, who he lived in Chinatown, and we would celebrate Chinese New Year's with all the time when we lived in New York. And then I think it was Johnny Buscema, who would come over to the house actually when he was younger, even before he was in comics, and he would come over for dinner and visit. But there weren't a lot of, most of these guys, most of the people who worked in comics had very little contact with each other, because they would work, solo at home, or like with Timely Marvel, they would work in a bullpen. And so my father did know Gene Colan, as was a very early friend of his, and Sid Shores, and they were all people from Timely, and also Stan Lee. But socially, no, there wasn't much interaction, mainly work interaction.
Much.
Thanks, Abdul, for those questions. I have a question. It seems like both you and your grandson Quinn are super committed to keeping, the flame of your dad's legacy alive. What drives you guys to do this?
Well, I think Quinn is more motivated than I am. He's very much motivated, and also my daughter Jackie, who has a website, Sequential Crush, and she's into mostly the romance comics, but still very interested in the Golden Age comics, and she's into keeping the flame alive. My other kids, not so much, but
That's
definitely
awesome.
Quinn.
So I know in the past that actually I'm sure when his time in comics weren't as popular nearly, or as looked as popularized, or they were pretty frowned upon back in the day, I would say. And I know that your dad used a pen name called Martin Nodell. Did he ever go into why he used a pen name?
Oh yeah, because he wanted to go into advertising, and it wouldn't look good to have used his real name. But after the success of Green Lantern, the publisher said, "Oh, Marty, why don't you just use your real name?" And then he used his real name. And then when he worked for Timely, basically everyone was pretty anonymous. They I guess up until when Kirby and those people were around, most of the artists just did a couple. They would do stuff the Marvel way, and they would do a couple pages. Stan Lee would come around and put a script in front of them, and they would do a couple pages. So, like a Timely story could have, 5 different artists. So there was no signing of the art or anything. That's why it's so hard to identify, like the early Timely works, and even when Kirby and those people in his era were around. It really takes a keen eye on knowing whose work is whose.
Yeah, that makes sense. Eric Fons, welcome to the stage, man. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, of course. Spencer, you may know me. My name is Chad Bokelman. I am one of the co-hosts of the Lantern Cast.
Oh, yeah, Chad. In fact, Quinn had that really good interview with you. Didn't you?
That was our sister show, Podcast of Owen.
Oh, okay. That was the other show. Okay. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I just want to, you talk a lot about, you just mentioned like some of the credits and stuff, and, people not putting their names on necessarily everything, maybe ghost writing or ghost inking and stuff like that. Can you tell the people a little bit about who's supposed to be credited actually with the creation of Alan Scott Green Lantern? Because we obviously see Bill Finger is named and other people. What's the actual? I mean, we talked a bit about how he came up with the concept. What's the actual logistics behind all that?
Okay, it's basically Martin Nodell. Bill Finger was brought in to clean up my dad's writing. My dad was not the world's greatest writer. So basically the whole idea was my father's. And just what Bill Finger did was he just kind of cleaned up my dad's concept and scripts and stuff. He wasn't he wasn't central to the Bill Finger was not central to the creation of the Green Lantern character. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. I know that's a point of contention out there, and I know you guys have been talking about it for a long time. So,
well, here's the thing. DC, because of rights, copyrights, and who owns what, was much more interested in pushing Bill Finger because for the longest time, they thought that Bill Finger had no heirs. And then all of a sudden, an heir showed up. And because DC knew that Martin Nodell had children and grandchildren, and so they have built up the Bill Finger legacy, which is overblown, to say the least.
Gotcha.
And I think also overblown with the Batman thing too. I mean, there's a lot of people connected with Batman, like Jerry Robinson, Sheldon Maldoff. There's a bunch of other people who are kind of neglected in favor of Bill Finger, and I think the credit should be given to those people.
100%. Thank you for taking my question, and I just want to let everybody out there listening know the Nodell family is a great family. I do a podcast about Green Lantern. It's been on the air for a long, long time, and the Nodells have been a great friend for us, more so than DC ever was. So, thank you so much.
DC is a funny organization. It's not a fun organization. It's a funny organization. I don't think I'm real fond of them, but they're in charge.
Thank you for coming up, Eric Bonds. Always appreciate it. Raul, welcome to the stage, man.
Thank you.
Hi, Ren. Hi, Spencer. I am a big fan for your firework. I have a facsimile for Green Lantern #1. It's one of my favorite comic books, and it's awesome talk with a person who see how this character was created. And I had one question for you. I want to ask you if you still have any sketch of your father when he created Alan Scott. He's one of my favorite Green Lanterns, and I have this question for I want to be an artist, and it's also know if you conserve any sketch of your father of art.
Oh, I have sketches that he did for shows, and but it would all be from the 1980s and up until his death in 2006. Nothing original. Here's an interesting thing. What happened to the original pages was they would go to the printers, and my dad never thought about requesting them back. He just figured, yeah, he did the art, and that was it. And what would happen with many artists was the original pages were used by the printers to clean the ink off their shoes. So that's what happened to the original art.
Wait, they use the pages to clean the ink off their food?
Yep, they would use it to clean off their feet. So, now there were some artists, there were a few artists who requested their pages. And most of those, like Golden Age artists, would sell some of their pages actually pretty cheaply at comic book shows. So there are pages from Golden Age artists out there, but in collections. Also, the other thing is, I heard that there was a couple pages of original Green Lantern art around, and this was quite a few years ago, that somebody had a couple of those pages, and that the reason they had them was that some printer picked them up and gave them to family members. So there might be, if you hunt around enough on eBay and other places, you might be able to find some Golden Age art, original pages. So,
thank you for answering the question.
You're welcome.
With you. I admire all of your fire.
Thank you.
Thanks for all for coming up as always. We have a question from the chat from Swampy. He was asking if Marty was involved in any recognizable stories or characters at Timely when he was there, or Marvel.
Oh, okay. He was. He worked on basically Captain America, Submariner, and the Human Torch. And he also was an editor on a romance comic that he did. But he would do like all the other people, like at Timely. He would do Stan would come around and hand them a couple pages, and they would do the art for it, and then they'd put it all together, and they'd call it a comic book. So that's how Timely operated. And Stan was the person who would come around and give everyone pages. So, but he basically, he might have worked on more things, but recognizable, I think the only things would be Human Torch and Submariner and maybe some Captain America. He did do a cover. Was it Horror Stories or Captain America Weird Tales number 7? Okay, Captain America Weird Tales number 7? 74. Number 74. He did the cover, and it's recognizable that it's his art.
Awesome.
And he might have done a lot more covers for them.
Yeah.
I really have no idea. It's not that my father's recollection was foggy. It's just that he never liked talking very much about comic books. He was much more into his career in advertising than he was into comic books. And it's like one of his friends was Harry Lampert, who did, let's see, who did Harry, The Flash. And he did the Golden Age Flash. And Harry absolutely no interest in comic books, really. He would go to he liked to go to comic book shows where he could play in a bridge tournament. And his fondest thing that he remembered in life, Harry Lampert remembered, was the book he wrote about contract bridge playing. So these guys, a lot of them weren't devoted to comic books.
Well, it's hard to, back in the day, it's hard to predict how popular they would have become back when they were just starting and doing it. There's no way.
Well, that's the thing. There was no, in fact, Timely would only, they were only able to publish when the distributors would send them money. And sometimes Stan would go around the office and fire everybody in their bullpen, or my dad just called it artist area. He would go around and fire everybody, and a week or two later, when Timely had some money, he would hire everybody back. In a freelance capacity. And then eventually the bullpen reformed, but Timely was always on its footing was not real positive. It was near bankruptcy all the time.
Yeah.
So that's the precursor to Marvel, and I guess Marvel's greatest days were when Kirby came aboard, and my dad never knew Kirby until later in life, when they were both, doing shows and stuff. But he never met Jack Kirby before that.
Did Marty ever explain the reasoning behind the color choices of Alan's costume? Swampy always thought it was fun that he was rocking purple and red instead of green, despite the name.
He just thought of colorful. He wanted something that would stand out, and that's why the purple, the red, the green, all the colors of the Golden Age Green Lantern, and actually, I think it had a lot to do with the publisher wanting something that really stood out, and he gave him something that really stood out.
Oh yeah.
So,
do you keep up to date with the recent character changes to Alan Scott? And if so, how do you feel about them?
Oh, the recent changes with Alan Scott? I really don't have that much of an opinion about it. I know they tried making him gay. I just think they grasp at straws, for this week the character's this, next month it'll be something else. So they keep changing what they want to do. I remember talking to Paul Levitz one time. He was the publisher of DC Comics, and he said, "Well, we're here in New York, and the people who control Warner Brothers are in LA, and we don't talk very much." So eventually what happened was the people in LA figured it out, and they moved DC to LA. They got them. They didn't want them as a very autonomous branch of Warner Brothers. They absorbed them.
Yeah. You said that you actually traveled with your dad to quite a few Comic Cons. Are there any like notable stories that stand out that you can remember from some of those cons that you mind sharing?
Well, there's a lot of stories, but I remember, and this one's pretty interesting. There was a huge Comic Con in Philadelphia, and it was the first and actually I think the only one they had run by this one guy. And Todd brought his first toy, which was a car, and he tried out making toys, and that's when he really started to get into the toy business. He had a Spawn car. That would have been in the mid '90s, I guess. And that was one thing. There were a lot of things. I remember one time at a show in Florida. I walked over to a table, and there was Jamie Farr, Corporal Klinger from MASH, and I was talking to him, and I said, "Oh, my dad is here, and he's creator of the Green Lantern." And Jamie Farr left his table, ran over to my dad's table, hugged my dad, and said to my dad, "You are my youth." I was a total Green Lantern fan. And so, I mean, so many people, would come up to my dad and want to talk to him. And, there was a great deal of appreciation for him that he was, and the biggest thing, he was of the Superman, Batman, and Green Lantern, he was the only one left doing shows. He was the only one still alive into the 2000s. So he was a constant a guest at so many shows.
How late in his life was he still going to Comic Cons?
He did his last Comic Con. He passed away in December of 2006, and his last show was the Motor City Comic Con. I think it was in May of 2006. So he he did a well. The thing was, it kept him going. He kind of hated the preparation for going, getting all the art done and packing his bags and everything. But when he got to a show, he loved it. I mean, he loved the attention. He loved the fans. He loved talking to young artists and writers. So he really enjoyed it up until pretty much the end of his life. And I think that was true with a lot of these the older artists. It was like the icing on the cake. It was something where you didn't have to work really hard, but you got a lot of enjoyment out of. So it was something he really enjoyed.
That's awesome. We actually have a comment from somebody in the audience. Gavin S. says, "First, I want to thank his dad for one of my favorite characters of all time. My question was, I know one of his inspirations for Green Lantern was the Richard Wagner's The Ring Cycle. Did he ever mention any specific themes of the Ring Cycle that helped him inspire the Green Lantern?
He would just always mention that was one of his inspirations, the Ring Cycle. And I really don't know much about the Ring Cycle. I don't know what it really entails. But he would always mention when he would do an interview or talk to people that was one of his inspirations. I never delved into what it was about the Ring Cycle. I probably should have, but I didn't. So,
no worries. Thank you, Gavin, for that question. Remember, you guys can always raise your hand coming up at any time and ask some questions. So is there any other? I said your dad was more focused on his marketing career rather than his comic career. At what point do you think those overlapped in any way, did he ever come around and say, you know what, I like comics more, or was he always focused more on his other career and comics was just a hobby?
I think he was always focused more on the advertising, but I think he did enjoy when DC would ask him to do a page or a couple pages in a comic book. He felt that was important. He had retired from advertising actually when he started doing the shows. I think his first show was the Chicago Comic-Con. And he had worked with a gentleman, Gary Calabono, who was a comic book dealer. And this gentleman, my dad was working for a newspaper, a suburban Chicago newspaper. And Gary was a space salesman and sold the advertising. And my dad would run into this Gary all the time. And Gary he was a collector and he owned a comic book store. And he never put it together that the Martin Nodell, who was taking his, who he brought art for to the newspaper, was the Martin Nodell that did Green Lantern. And then my dad was leaving that job, and they were moving to Florida. And my mother said to him, "Oh, Marty, they want to do a little article about you in their company paper." And right in there about that you did, you created the Green Lantern and you did comic books, and you can tell the public now you're retired. And so Gary read the article in the company publication, and he came running to my dad, and he did this long interview with him. And somewhere Gary has that interview somewhere on a shelf at home. But Gary was one of the partners in the Chicago Comic-Con, and he had my dad come to a show, and that's how my dad started doing the comic book shows.
Wow. Awesome. Straight in the audience says, I think it was 02 or 03, Wizard World Philly, when I met you, your dad, and mom. We had such a great talk. He was so full of life and joy. He helped me pitch which book to sign, and it is my prized book, Green Lantern Volume 2, number 40, First Alan and Silver DL. I just want to say thank you for sharing your dad with us fans. And then we have another question from Gavin, who said, if it hasn't been asked already, how did the creation of Alan's sidekick, Doiby, come about, and what was Martin's favorite part of drawing Alan Scott?
Well, I think the thing about Doiby was, Batman had Robin, and Superman had Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane. So they wanted him to have someone comical. And a taxi cab driver was kind of normal for New York City. Using him as a foil or whatever else, comic relief. That's how Doiby came about. Is there
if Martin's favorite part of drawing Alan Scott?
Oh, finishing a drawing. I think he was happiest when he could finish up the art, and because he'd have all these fans who wanted art, and so he would really push out a lot of artwork for the fans. So he was happy when he finished doing it, the artwork. I think that was his favorite part.
Go ahead and unmute and ask if
Yeah, it's me again. I just wanted to ask, I've had an opportunity to interview quite a lot of comic book creators, including like Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams and stuff. And they talked a lot about how absolutely insane it was to see the comic book medium explode into, going to cons and stuff like that, big budget films. And I never got the opportunity to speak with your dad, obviously, but I was always curious what his reaction to this whole medium was, because he had to go from hiding his real identity to going to conventions and then seeing his concept evolve with John Broome and Gil Kane and Julie Schwartz into Hal Jordan and all the subsequent lanterns that would come later on. What was it like for him just to watch this thing he originally had to hide from the world explode into what it is today?
I was thinking he was kind of nonchalant about it. I don't think he had, that much of an opinion about it. He kind of he accepted it because he was always very accepting of change. He wasn't someone stuck in the past, or he was always going with change. So it was kind of a natural progression. For him, that that he was part of this, and I think some of the things he cherished the most was his advertising work, and he wasn't that the comic books, it was just, hey, this is something I did, and they want to make movies, they want to make movies, they want to make toys, they want to make toys. He really didn't have a great deal of I could say wonder about it or anything. He just figured, hey, this is the way things change. And it was funny. I had one story that he relayed to me one time. It was a show I didn't go to with him, and Bob Kane was at the show, creator of Batman, and my dad hadn't seen him in like 40 years. And my dad said, my mom said, well, why don't you go over and say hello to Bob? You haven't seen him in 40 years. And my dad said, no, I really don't want to talk to him. And so finally my mom convinces him to go talk to Bob Kane. And he walks over to where Bob Kane was sitting. And Bob Kane says, my dad introduces himself, Martin Nodell, creator of the Green Lantern. And Bob Kane's response was pretty much, so, that's nice. And he really didn't have much of a conversation with him. I mean, there were certain people he got along with very well, like Stan Lee. He was very fond of Stan, and Stan was very fond of him. They both liked each other's company, and my dad he just kind of accepted stuff. He was happy.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of. If you go back and watch some of the old interviews with Golden Age artists, I know one of them actively referred. I think it was Irwin Haston said we were just a bunch of little guys, a bunch of schmucks, is what he said.
Well, yeah. Well, Irwin Haston. He's interesting. He was an interesting character, but he did do the Green Lantern. After he kind of started doing pages when my dad was still doing pages, and then he kind of took over doing pages later in the 1940s. I mean, some people were bitter about their lot in life doing comics and not getting a lot of money out of it. But some of them really enjoyed their, time in comics. And some of the more recent artists, like George Perez, who was just a wonderful person. He was such a decent human being, and I was really sad when he passed away. I remember sitting in an airport with George one time, and George would do a lot of art at the shows for charity, and I said to him, George, don't you need some of that money? Because he would raise like $5,000 or $10,000 at a show. I said, George, don't you need that money? You have some health concerns that you need to address. And he said, no, I'm doing just fine. So, I mean, some of the artists really enjoyed what they did. But I think most of them, like Irwin Haston said, were just a bunch of little guys doing a job. And my dad, that's one thing my dad did say, we didn't think about what we were doing except getting a paycheck for doing pages. And that's what their interest was to get a paycheck.
Sure. Thanks for taking my question.
Thanks for coming up. So unfortunately, your father passed away in 2006, and then in 2011, they released the first ever live action form of Green Lantern. What was your reaction to hearing the news that a live action was coming? And then did you also watch the movie? And if so, what was your reaction to the movie?
Oh, you mean the movie with Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends who liked it. I thought it was terrible.
What was your reaction to hearing the news that it was going to happen, though?
That it happened?
Like,
it wasn't much of a reaction because I went to see it in the movies and I thought it wasn't very good. And then when the credits rolled, there was no credit. It was created by that Green Lantern was, created by Martin Nodell. There was no credit at all. And DC for the longest time, and you can see with the progression of stuff now, they're pushing Green Lantern, but they wanted to ditch Green Lantern for the longest time, and then they finally figured out that maybe it's valuable. That people really have an interest in the Golden Age Green Lantern, but as far as animated versions, I haven't even seen them. I went to see the live action movie, and I gotta say that Ryan Reynolds and what's her name, Lively. What really surprised me about that movie was those two did not seem to have any chemistry. And it really surprised me that they got married. It's like I went to see Spider-Man, and I thought there was a lot of chemistry between his love interest and Spider-Man and then Green Lantern. I went, my God, these are like stiff figures. So, that's my opinion. Agree,
What do you think your dad's opinion would have been on the movie? Same.
If what had happened in the movie?
If your dad was able to watch the movie, do you think his reaction would have been the same as yours?
Oh, he would have just said, "Oh, that's some art about Gil Kane." He would have. I don't think he would have said very much about it, And one of the things, this is, like I would sit down and maybe watch a TV show or something. My dad never watched a TV show. He never sat down and watched anything on TV. He didn't like to go to the movies. He would sit there and watch the commercials. And as soon as the commercials were over, he would get up and leave. He liked the commercials. He did not like So he did not like. I remember he would never sit and watch anything. My mom could watch a movie on TV or something, and he would come into the room to watch the commercials, and that was it.
What was some of the last pieces of work that your dad did, like comic-wise? What was that?
Well, he did a story called Nobody, and with Siddhartha's book with Harlan Ellison. He did that, and he did a Harlequin page in the Who's Who. Yeah, the Who's Who. And then he did in Superman. He did a page with Green Lantern and Superman, right? What is it?
Superman Gallery.
Oh yeah, Superman Gallery #1. So he would do, and then he did 3 pages earlier, which I don't even remember the name of the book. But he didn't do a lot of print stuff. He did this thing called The Beacon for, it was under the Image label, but I don't remember exactly, who was the editor or anything. But,
Yeah, you got a little encyclopedia of information behind you.
Well, yeah, there's probably. I'd have to ask my daughter Jackie because she knows all the information. She's a historian and she's up on all this stuff.
Awesome. Well, I was curious. I kind of wanted to ask Clint a question because you mentioned earlier that it's mostly him and your daughter that are the ones determined to keep Martin's legacy alive. I was curious what inspires him to do that.
He's a crazy high school kid. I don't know what the reasoning is, but I appreciate it, and I definitely anything I can do to help him, I do. But he's interested in it, and my daughter, her motivation in comic books is she, as I said, she's a historian, and she does some writing, and she wrote a book called Sequential Crush, and which is available on Amazon. And she's also done some forwards and some other writing in books. So she's really into the comic books.
Awesome. Well, Spencer, I appreciate you spending so much time with us tonight. This has been awesome. And I was just wondering if you had maybe like a story about your dad, or maybe it doesn't have to be comic related at all, that maybe stands out to you that can attest to his character, or just who your dad was as a person that stands out to you?
Well, okay. Here's a good story. Is he would do when I was younger, maybe 10, 11, or even younger. He would work at home. He would do a lot of his commercial art at his drawing board at home. And
you can stay.
Hold on a second.
You can stay.
Okay. And he would draw at home. And I'd say, "Oh, Dad, can you come out and play some baseball with me?" And he'd say, "No, but here's a paper bag. And go out and get me some fresh air and bring it back to the apartment." And this was constant, It's like, "Dad, can you go out and throw a baseball around with me?" And he would always go, "Oh, well, here's a paper bag." I mean, that was. And then I would always get at the shows, I would get a question, how does it feel to be the son of the creator of the Green Lantern? And I would go, well, like any son in the 1950s, you would try to avoid your father as much as possible. It's just the way things were. Things are so different today. We're proud of our fathers, but it was a different relationship. In those days. And it's just so funny, these people at shows would ask me all the time, well, how it was relating to, your dad. And then, another interesting story, it's a funny story that We were at a show in Tampa, and we were going out to dinner with the guy, the promoter of the show, and the big guest for the show was Stan Lee, and we went to this restaurant in Tampa, a real nice restaurant in Tampa, and we're sitting at the table, and this couple comes over and says, "Oh, can we get some autographs?" And my dad goes, No, we're eating. And Stan said, "Oh, yeah, let me give you some autographs." And so my dad relents, and he gives him an autograph. And so the people walk away from the table, and Stan explains. He says, in Hollywood or in LA, I'm a nobody. Nobody knows who I am. They go for the actors and whatever, and no one knows who I am. And this was great. He loved it. But he was a real showman. He was always very nice to me. So I have nothing but good things to say about Stan.
I see Raw hop back up on stage. What's up, Raw? Go ahead and say whatever you want.
I had another question. I don't know if when you was a kid, you read comics. Who is your favorite character of comic books? When you was yes, sorry, my English is
No, it's fine. Oh, my favorite comics were was Archie. Love Jughead. Archie, Betty, Veronica. I mean, those were my favorites. And here's the interesting thing. When I was a kid, we had all the Golden Age books because my mom would go up. My mom would deliver the artwork to DC. My dad worked at home, and he would, to meet the deadlines, he would work through the night. And my mom would get on the subway and take the artwork up to the offices of DC, or actually it was National Periodicals. And she would take the artwork up there, and at the office there, they would have all the latest comic books, Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, whatever comics they were publishing at the time. And you could pick up copies of it. And my mom would pick up the comics and bring them home. So when my brother and I were kids, we would read the Green Lantern, Batman, Superman, all the Golden Age books, which I would think now, if I still own those books and they were in good condition, would be worth millions and millions of dollars. But we would just read them, give them to our friends, trash them, whatever. And that's why there's so few Golden Age books around, or especially in good shape.
Yeah, hindsight, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we would. It was also a favorite to put in your wheels of your bicycle with a clothespin. You would put baseball cards. So your Mickey Mantle rookie card. You would, so it would make a noise. You'd hear a noise, and it would ruin the card. But what's a Mickey Mantle rookie card worth? So we had no idea what any, even in the 1960s and 70s, you could still buy Golden Age books inexpensively. they're not worth them. They weren't. No one regarded them as being worth anything. And, it's amazing what they're worth now. And I don't have any. So that's the story of what I read. But comic books were sold in off spinning racks in drugstores and soda fountains, and we would. I remember, I think in New York they call them candy stores, and you go in there and you get your 10-cent comic, and you would go up to the soda counter, and for a nickel you could get a Coke. And I just remember when I was a little kid, one of the worst things that happened when the cost of a Coke went from a nickel to 6 cents. It was irregular. That was like one of the worst things that ever happened in my life. So, and it was, I got to say, the best thing was growing up in Brooklyn in the 1950s and early 60s. Nothing like it. I mean, it's something that you just couldn't recreate today. It was different.
Times change. Hope that answers your question, bro.
Excuse me?
Yes, I had one more. Sorry, I go for this in my bookcase. I think this. I start my homework. I have.
Oh yeah, he signed your book. Yeah, and that's a copy of All America 16, isn't it? That page.
Sorry?
That's All America 16.
Yes.
And the cover was done by a 17 or 18-year-old Sheldon Maldoff. The cover was done by the cover on All America 16 was done by Sheldon Maldoff. And my dad didn't do the cover. He did the interiors of the book.
It's, I read this comic when I had 10 years old. My father gave me this comic. Is for my father's collection. He gave me a lot of classic comic books, and this is my favorite for this collection of my dad.
Well, it's a classic story. It's a classic story. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for existing in the state, and thank you for you. I have requested an admiration for your dad, and he inspired me for being an artist. He's one of a lot of artists who inspire me, and he's also with you.
Thanks, bro, for coming up. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your question.
Well, I know we're quite over the hour here, and I know you guys are trapped in McDonald's. It doesn't seem like too many more questions from the audience. So, Spencer, I want to thank you again so much for being here. This has been great, learning about your family and your dad. If there's any final thoughts or comments you'd like to make to the audience here while we have you, feel free.
Well, I really appreciate this being able to talk to everybody and talk to all the fans.